Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Miss Brothers. I just wanted to take some time to walk you through this reading on DNA. So I'm going to read through this, and then I'm going to tell you certain things that I'd like you to highlight. So I'll read the paragraph, and then we'll go back and highlight it. Then I'll read the next paragraph and go back and highlight it. That way you guys are kind of hitting what I think are some of the most important points of this reading. All right, let's go ahead and start. I'll have a little green pointer here. It says DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the genetic material found in cells. DNA is often called the blueprint of life because it contains the instructions for growth and development of organisms. DNA is able to do this by acting like a recipe book for all of the proteins an organism needs. So let's go back and highlight a few things that I think are particularly important. For starters, let's go ahead and highlight what DNA stands for. It stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, I do think it's important that you learn how to pronounce this, but, for the sake of this class, also if you just want to use DNA, as long as you know what it stands for. It's the genetic material in cells. We know this because we learned about that earlier when we talked about cells. Again, DNA is often called the blueprint of life because it contains instructions for growth and development of organisms. And finally, this last bit where DNA is able to do this by acting like a recipe book for all of the proteins an organism needs. So we ended up highlighting a lot of that paragraph, but there's a lot in that paragraph that's a really big deal, okay? And if you want to, you can go ahead and annotate it as well. So maybe if we annotate this in blue, you might write something like, for this first highlight, this is the definition. I'm not going to annotate all of this. This is something that you do your own annotations or not. It's, I tend to annotate everything when I highlight, but we'll get to that. All right, this next part, I'm going to go ahead and read it. You guys can follow along, and then we'll highlight a few more things. DNA is a nucleic acid, which is one of the 4 macromolecules. It is made of smaller units called nucleotides. Each nucleotide has 3 parts: a sugar, called a deoxyribose, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous group. That's what this is right here. Some of you might say nitrogenous or nitrogenous base. We'll talk more about those in just a second. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of highlighting here that DNA is a nucleic acid. It's one of the macromolecules. It's made of smaller units called nucleotides. So we're just going to say it's made of nucleotides. And each nucleotide has 3 parts: a sugar, called the deoxyribose, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base. Okay, so far so good. All right, let's go to the next section. This next section talks about there are 4 different nitrogenous or nitrogenous bases in DNA: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. Now, when these are sort of universal symbols, these little shapes that you see, and one of the reasons that they make these little universal shapes is because these things sort of pair together. In other words, adenine always pairs with thymine, and guanine always pairs with cytosine. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, when you're looking at these, you can see right here's our sugar. There's our nitrogenous base right here. And here's our phosphate group right here. This is the nucleotide right here. And you can see this whole thing together is a nucleotide. So one of the things that we'll end up doing as we study DNA more closely is kind of getting how all of these things sort of fit together. Okay? Let's go ahead and go to the next paragraph. DNA is a double-stranded molecule, meaning that it has 2 strands of nucleotides. Look at the image to the left, and specifically they're talking about this image right here. The 2 strands of DNA are connected by matching nitrogenous bases in the middle. There are rules for how these bases match up. These are the rules right here. So what we'll do is we'll do a little highlighting right here, so that you understand that the bases, and then you can do specifically, I'm just going to go ahead and highlight this whole thing just like this, so that I understand that I've got two different things going on. My adenine always pairs with thymine, and my cytosine always pairs with guanine. Let's keep going. The DNA ladder twists into a shape called a double helix. You can see in the picture to the right how the nitrogenous bases pair in the middle. Fill in the missing letters on the DNA strand. So specifically, remember what I said earlier about how these things pair up. All right? So we're going to go ahead and do that in blue. So like for instance, one of the missing pairs is right here. So we would put a T right here for thymine. Actually, let's make that a little bit bigger because it's kind of hard to see. I'm going to erase that. I'm going to put a T right here. I'm going to put a G right here because it's pairing with cytosine. I'm going to put an A right here because we can see it's pairing up with thymine. We've got another thymine right here, so we know that that's going to be an adenine. And it's tough to see, but if you were going to put another one, we would put a C right there, but we don't need to. Okay. So as far as highlighting this section, we're going to go ahead and highlight the section right here that says the DNA ladder twists into a shape called a double helix. Ultimately, the order of the letters in DNA will determine which protein is made. And that's one of the things that we will talk about in this unit is called protein synthesis, and that has everything to do with how DNA is wrapped in that double helix. So what you're going to do right now, you're going to use this word bank down here, and you're going to go ahead and search for those words that we saw within the reading. Nucleotide, sugar, thymine, ladder, base, guanine, cytosine, DNA, protein, double helix, phosphate, code, deoxyribose, and adenine. So you'll need to fill out these questions as well, and you can find those things right here within this reading. As soon as you're done, you can go ahead and turn this in. Well, actually, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and have you just go ahead and put this into the next available page of your notebook. And if you want to check the answers with me later to these last questions, you can certainly do that. All right, well done.